afternoon. Welcome to another Brighter Day in the Neighborhood. I'm Angela Jones, founder of Brighter Day Law, our sponsor, and we have with us today a guest from the Vradenburg Foundation, Claire Swinford.
Happy to be here.
I know. I'm so excited. It's been so cold and crazy out lately, so I'm glad you were able to make it over.
Yeah, the sun's back out, and super glad to be talking with you today about the wider community here in Colorado Springs.
Right, and so we were kind of chatting before, we started on the air about the various things you've gotten into. But I'm real excited for our listeners to find out a little bit more about you, Claire.
Well, happy to share. I'm a over 20-year Pikes Peak Region resident. I was born in Denver, but lived in the Springs for a long time, and have seen this region change a lot over that time. But I have always been drawn to arts and culture in this community. Certainly, those were the meaningful connections that really convinced me to stay and make my career here. Having grown up in northern El Paso County, kind of thinking, oh man, maybe I should hightail it for the coast. And just the meaningful connections of this city's arts and culture makers, patrons, people who see that as an important part of their quality of life, really resonated with me and convinced me that this would be the place.
Well, that's cool. So have you always lived in Colorado? Did you go to school in Colorado as well?
I actually studied out of state. I like I said, hightailed it for the coast. I made it as far as Spokane, Washington.
Nice.
And studied at Whitworth University and got dual degrees in journalism and in French literature. I'll let you guess which one I ended up using after I graduated.
I'm sure we use them all. Like, I've actually had occasion to use algebra once or twice.
It's funny how it comes back and finds its way into whatever you happen to be doing. It's true. It's true.
It's kind of funny. So, I think we were talking about how you're a skier. You're an avid skier. So were you able to ski when you're in Washington as well?
Yes, and I'll say it's much more like sliding down a mountain of ice than the beautiful champagne powder we get here in Colorado. But it really allows you to hone your skills and become a better skier. It's just that it's very different conditions.
Right. Well, I always get real interested in anyone who's an avid skier. I grew up in Florida, and so I grew up skiing on water.
Oh, man, that's a whole different skill set.
It's a very different skill set. And so when we were stationed overseas in Germany, my kids were coming up, and they're all of my children are skiers and snowboarders and everything here. But we went and I tried to learn to ski, on this little bunny hill they used to call it the backyard at Garmisch. And I figured out I can ski, I just can't stop, which is a bad plan, whether you're on powdery white snow or ice.
Or the ice. You need to have that stopping power.
Absolutely. Well, getting back to how much Colorado Springs has changed, we were talking a little bit earlier about, since we moved here, I guess it's 8 years ago or so, I've really seen a push or I don't know, or just more of the arts, visual arts and art initiatives in Colorado Springs. And I know you're real tied into that community. So what's been going on?
What is happening?
In a good way.
It's one of my favorite things to talk about because it's kind of a hidden narrative of the Pikes Peak region that we have always been an arts place.
Really?
Even going back to the city's founder, General Palmer, one of the institutions that he was most interested in fostering here was a strong art scene. Palmer's known for building railroads and hospitals, and you saw later generations of those city builders creating hotels and attractions and all the other things that would sort of bolster the life and the economy of this region. But for people like William Jackson Palmer and Spencer Penrose, and certainly his wife, Julie Penrose, they saw the arts as being a key part of what would give Colorado Springs staying power. Because what they were looking at was, we were in this period of our nation's history where you saw these boom and bust towns, right? Like,
right.
Okay, there's gold here. Our population is 80,000 people. Oh, the gold's gone. Now we've got 8 people.
Right.
We've got these railway towns that would, just rise up and fall away seemingly overnight. And they didn't want that to happen here. They thought this place is beautiful. There are wonderful things here. We want to make sure that what we're building is going to last. We think that newspapers, schools, arts, and culture are going to be the things that really make this a town as opposed to just something that vanishes by night. And so that's where you see the people who were most concerned with making Colorado Springs a lasting place for beauty and for families and for the economy to flourish, saw the arts as a key part of that. That's where you see Spencer Penrose's wife, Julie, getting together with her gal pals and starting a little thing called the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center.
Right.
And in the first year that institution was open, it opened right as the economy fell apart nationally, right as we were starting the Great Depression. And in the first year it was open, fully half the city's population walked through those doors.
Wow.
And they were bringing in the most the brightest stars of our nation's arts and culture to do work in Colorado Springs. So we had Alexander Calder designing sets. We had Langston Hughes and Frank Lloyd Wright giving lectures. Right. We had all of these wonderful artistic minds coming to Colorado Springs, not only to demonstrate their craft, but to learn. And Colorado Springs really, that was where we started to attract that reputation of being Little London, the jewel of the Rocky Mountain West, was because of institutions like that. And what's funny about that is that we went through this long period where that history wasn't really told. And people, move here like I did in the 90s and you did in the 2000s and just weren't aware of that. Colorado Springs, it's got great weather. We've got, the Olympics and Garden of the Gods and the Air Force Academy.
Right, exactly.
But we didn't add arts to that list.
Right.
And I think what we're starting to see is, you said it's becoming more visible. And I think that's a wonderful way to look at it because we're seeing, I think, a couple things. We're seeing people recognizing that the arts sort of confer that sense of place that makes us feel like we've got something special. Colorado Springs is a special place. We see arts and culture being part of that. It's a quality of life thing. You can sit at home and watch Netflix every night of the week if you want, but if you want to be connected to your neighbors and feel like you've had a meaningful experience, chances are it involves the arts. It involves getting out of your house.
Right.
And I think the other thing we see is really emphasis by the state of Colorado on how the arts contribute to our economy. So we were talking before the show started about all of the great murals downtown, talking about seeing more live performances, all of these great art activities. And certainly from the perspective of the Downtown Creative District, they're getting a lot of their juice from this program that was set up by Governor Hickenlooper, where he said, man, the arts really have an impact on the economy, not only in Colorado's big Front Range metropolises, but even in little ski communities in the mountains, even in rural communities like Mancos and Ridgeway. You're seeing the arts have an impact not only on people's lives, but on the dollar, on the economy in those towns. And so he set up this program that was designed to foster the arts as an economic driver for Coloradans. And we have been a downtown certified creative district since 2014. We were one of the first. Colorado Springs was one of the first cities to get a certified creative district, which comes with help from the State Office of Economic Development. So we are seeing support for our artists and the impact they have on our local economy coming from the state and really making an impact in Colorado Springs.
Well, you're very passionate about that, and definitely, I think we can tell where you've used your degree. The degree has paid off. Are you sure it wasn't in history?
Well, I've come to love the history of this town, and I think it's always fun to surprise people with some of the stuff that they might have been less aware of about this community.
No, I think it's fantastic. I have some photographic prints of Colorado, back in the Nikola Tesla era, of our street or of Tejon, just different that then and now. And my husband's military and he enjoys history, so we get the historic books of every area that we've been to. But I really wasn't aware of that art history. Especially, I think we arrived in 2014, as that designation was coming into play. And I know there are various initiatives, and we go to the Pikes Peak Center and various things like that, and we've absolutely seen like with the Olympic Museum. That is an art statement in and of itself.
100%.
It's huge. And we had a guest on the show a couple weeks ago, and I think we're going to have him back here soon about the Asian Cultural Center, other types of things that we're doing. But it's actually even in noticing as I'm walking downtown, where there would be an art display, not just the historic monuments, that you would, typically see, but really some art initiatives, some paint, like murals being painted, and moving art exhibits and different types of things like that. And you're an artist in your own right, aren't you?
Yes, I have maintained a studio painting practice since I moved back to Colorado Springs after college.
Okay, and what type of paintings do you do?
Well, let's see. I have a couple different series, but I do narrative figure painting, so I'm painting people. I'm
Okay.
not just splashing color up there and, talking about my feelings that way. I
Mm-hmm.
really like to paint the human figure and I like to tell a story through the human figure.
Oh, wow.
So the works that I do tend to have a certain amount of ambiguity. You're not quite sure what you're seeing, but you can easily build yourself a narrative based on what you're seeing in front of you.
Hmm.
And I think that's such an interesting type of art to do because you're really working in tandem with the viewer to create the piece of art, which is not only what's on the canvas, but what's being perceived in the mind of the person looking at it.
Right. Okay. And so tell me how you got into that type of work.
I had a wonderful mentor. My first job in Colorado Springs was working for the Independent, the local news weekly,
Mm-hmm.
and I was sent out to interview this guy who owned a gallery downtown, and I was interviewing him about his
Mm-hmm.
next show. And as we got to talking, he said, "Well, you really seem to have a passion for this kind of stuff. I teach classes." And I said, "I've never picked up a paintbrush. Like,
Really?
I don't know how I feel about that." He said, "No, why don't you come on down and just give it a try?" So I'm like walking down this alley off Tejon Street at night, going into this little historic garage building, and it's full of just amazing people,
Wow.
military veterans, people in the business world, young parents, this wonderful mix of people, and they're all there because they realize that painting is something that makes them happy. And I realized
Wow.
I was one of those people too.
Oh, neat.
So
And how long ago was that?
that would have been 2010.
Okay.
And that person who invited me into that space, Brett Andrus, is considered,
Yeah.
one of the titans of the arts community
Mm-hmm.
here,
Mm-hmm.
and he and I are still wonderful friends to this
Does
day.
he still do his little painting classes inside that
He's taken a
garage
break from
studio?
that. He's starting
Mm-hmm.
a new arts venture with some other wonderful local artists that we should be hearing more about later this year.
Wow.
But you can still go into those little alley galleries downtown and
Right.
have a one of a kind of experience.
Oh, that's really cool. And so I know you kind of touched upon veterans, like
Mm-hmm.
veterans out there, as well as business people, what have you. But when we were talking earlier, you seem to have a special heart for veterans and how art improves the lives of, especially wounded veterans.
Well, I know it means a lot to the people in this community because we have so many military bases and so many of the folks who have chosen to call the Pikes Peak region home came here because they were stationed here. And certainly my family's ties to the Pikes Peak region come from a different strand of our heritage, the Western heritage. My dad was a little Midwest boy whose dad served in the Navy during World War II, and post war, the family decided they were going to take their first family vacation together, and they said, "Well, hey, little Ricky, where do you want to go?" And he said, "Can we go to where Bonanza is?"
That's funny.
But
So do you even really, I always think when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, that was when I was a kid. And I always wonder who else knows about Bonanza besides me.
yeah, he wanted to touch a mountain, so they
That's
brought him
funny.
here. But certainly having grown up here and having been friends with, so many people here whose parents were, active duty military, recognizing that for those families and for those communities in particular, arts and culture are often one of the first things that they encounter that help a faraway place feel like home. Certainly if you're stationed overseas, starting to intersect with those things can help feel like make an unfamiliar place feel familiar. And, with regard to this community,
Right.
I think we were talking a little bit about, well, coming home and starting to get resituated after being in a combat zone. You need that same sense of home and you need that same sense of groundedness. And certainly having learned from some of the combat veterans with whom I took painting classes, the arts were something that helped them feel grounded in that way, helped give them that sense of place, that sense of community that they needed in order to fully re-enter civilian life.
So you're listening to Brighter Day in the Neighborhood. I'm your host, Angela Jones. And today we have joining us Claire Swinford. So, what is, kind of going on, just with you these days? What are you getting into professionally or otherwise in the art world?
Well, it's a fun turning point for me personally because I just started working for a new organization here at the
Okay.
start of 2022. So I took over as the head of the Vradenburg Foundation, which is an arts organization. It funds arts and culture activities around the Pikes Peak region, all the way from the eastern half of Teller County out to the plains of El Paso County and everything in between. And I'm really thrilled to be working in this position because it allows me to touch on all sorts of interesting cultural initiatives happening throughout the community, from dance and film to youth projects to spoken word poetry, all the way up to working with our region's most robust arts institutions like the Colorado Springs Philharmonic.
Right.
So really giving them the concerted care and support that they need in order to thrive.
While I have you, and you're so like dialed in on these types of things, do you have a resource where people can go and kind of find out all things art and culture?
Absolutely. Yeah, the best resource for a resident of the Pikes Peak region is called peakradar.com.
Okay.
And that is our regional cultural calendar. So it doesn't matter what you're into, if it's traditional Hawaiian dance or wood carving or taking a painting class
Yeah.
or going to a rock concert. That is the place to find out what's happening, who's presenting it, and how you can get involved.
And that's Peak Radar.
Peakradar.com.
And then you mentioned something about art funding and different kinds of things like that. What's the way if someone has an artistic or cultural initiative they're working on and they wanted to get connected with the resources that you're tapped into?
This is an interesting region to be in that kind of work because we don't have a lot of the support systems that other communities across Colorado do. We don't have a percent for arts like Denver does.
Right.
But what we do have is, we have some local funders who are really interested in seeing art and artists succeed. The Vradenburg Foundation certainly is one of them. The name is impossible to spell, but if you search B Arts Colorado Springs, it'll come up for you.
Right.
And the reason behind the funny name is B herself was a huge champion for the arts. She ran the Colorado Springs Symphony Orchestra for nearly 4 decades at a time where Colorado Springs was a tiny, tiny town. And the thought that we would have a nationally regarded symphony orchestra sounded like pie in the sky. But she was a music lover, and she knew that even a small town deserves to have a place where you can go and listen to world-class music. That was what she built for this community. And that is what we try to carry on to this day, is the idea that no matter what you're into, you deserve to be able to partake of exemplary arts activities in your hometown.
And I love that. I've definitely always heard it told and subscribed to the notion that all great cities have to have a great library. But I think that's also another one of those aspects that I think can make, a city truly great, and I think if only we had an NFL team or an NBA team, we might not be more than a second city. But I'm going to cross my fingers and hold my breath for that one.
Well, we have a soccer team and a great downtown stadium, so we're making progress.
We're making great progress. And our law office is very close to where Colorado College just built its new hockey arena, which is fantastic.
Go Tigers.
Yeah, so we're like right all in the hub of it. And, so we're super excited about what's happening downtown.
Feels like there's good energy, doesn't it?
It really does. And, and it was even during the period of the COVID when everybody sort of pulled together to, build shelters for people to still go downtown and eat. Yeah, I think it's all a part. I don't know how to like really piece it together precisely, but it seems like it's all part and parcel of the same thing.
Oh, 100% it is.
Right.
And I'll give a shout out to my colleagues at my former position with the Downtown Partnership. They are the premier organization leading that effort.
Oh, wow.
To ensure that as a great city, Colorado Springs has a great downtown, because we know that no matter where you live in Colorado Springs, you're going to come downtown for something, and you deserve to have a great time when you do.
Right. And we do. We do. I mean, I will tell you, anytime we're downtown and it's a little sunny, everything just really,
just blossoms.
It really does. And I think, at least when I first came here, you hear sort of word of mouth, oh, Colorado Springs is like this or like that. And it wasn't too long ago, I think I was in Florida, and I met a gal who lived in Longwood, and I told her I was, lived in the Springs, and she was like, "Oh, the Springs," and I'm like, "No, seriously, it's super cool." I would rather live in the Springs than Longwood. You know what I mean?
I think the Springs got a bad rap for a little while, but it is refreshing to start to meet people who have that opposite frame of reference, who have been here a little more recently and are like, "Oh yeah, here's what I love about your city." And I think the interesting thing so many times is it's something that you never would have thought of. Because we listed all the usual suspects, right?
Right.
Okay, we've got USAFA, we've got the Garden of the Gods, we've got the Olympic Museum. But you'll have somebody, from some far-flung corner of the country say, "Oh, I was in Colorado Springs and I did X, Y, Z." And you go, "I've lived here for 20 years and I haven't done X, Y, Z. I think that's so cool."
Right.
So the fact that this town is becoming so many different things to so many different people
and
is really encouraging.
Yeah, top tier restaurants. I mean, my son asked me the other day. He and his girlfriend are having I guess their first year anniversary of dating.
Aw.
He was like, "Where's a place in downtown Denver?" I'm like, "Don't go to Denver. Here, I will give you 6 places that are going to like beat Elway's."
That's
what I mean?
right.
Right here in town. That it's closer. It's a better experience, and it's supporting us locally. I feel like the vibe it just is it's cozier, it's smaller, and I love that you're involved with the group that's supporting it. And you've been involved in the city, like you said, in these two businesses or foundations or what have you. But, there's other things that you've been involved with in the Springs as well, just in terms of helping bring it along.
Well, that's near and dear to my heart as an artist who's married to an artist. Certainly we'll always default to, okay, what's great in the cultural sphere. But we're also mountain bikers. We love our local trails system. We're really invested in seeing that initiatives related to our climate and our water usage are being led forward responsibly.
Right.
So there are all sorts of wonderful ways to get involved in the community in Colorado Springs. But I think that it's especially heartening to recognize that you have a love for something, reach out to the folks who are serving that cause locally, and being welcomed in with open arms. I've seen that happen in Colorado Springs more than anywhere else I've lived. It's a community that if you care, you're going to be able to connect with others who care and really make a difference.
Right. And how about I'll share one of my favorite things to do, and it's not news to anybody here, but it's like to go to the breweries. But now we have several beer gardens, and beer gardens were something that I loved when we lived in Germany in particular. And now there are so many that are springing up, and people get sometimes the wrong idea about a beer garden, like it's a place to drink beer, but it really isn't. It's a place to socialize. People bring their children out. There's usually live music, and there usually is, beer and some type of, pretzels or other types of thing. But it really brings communities together. And we've got there's a really large sort of beer garden that has been established right off Garden of the Gods,
You're talking about Red Leg?
I am talking about Red Leg.
Oh my gosh, they did such a good job.
Is Sausage Fest. So, yeah, absolutely. And so that's, getting that, aspect of the Springs really highlighted, because it's not known for that. But that is another, I think, a particular pet project of many military or former military folks is to get into that. I live in Black Forest, and we have a brewery up there that's fantastic too, with the food trucks. And, so food and beer are near and dear to my heart. But what is something you could say, like, hey, not everybody in the Springs knows about this, but this is one of my favorites?
Ooh, so hidden gems or things that I just think are absolutely wonderful. You know what? I'll give a shout out to this is goes along with beer and wonderful food, but I'll give a shout out to the Women's Mountain Biking Association.
What? Okay.
Because they were one of the organizations that really convinced me that I was a real Coloradan after all, that I actually knew what to do on a mountain bike. And there's actually a lot of active duty and former military folks who get involved as ride leaders, but it is an organization led by women for women who like being on a bike and want to improve their skills. And so they will do, during the warmer months, they will do weekly trail rides all across the most wonderful parks and open spaces in El Paso County, with the goal of, even if you've never ever ridden a bicycle before, getting you out on a trail and helping you have a wonderful time. And yes, every ride does have a designated brewery where we all go afterwards.
Oh, there's that. There's that. And I'm not a big drinker at this juncture. I drank more in the past than I do now, but you cannot, ever pass up a good opportunity to at least have a taster. So I'll have to check that out. And I'll hit you up for some tips and tricks relative to seats, because that's always been my barrier to entry.
Oh my goodness.
On a bike, even it's just too much.
I hear you.
Well, unfortunately, we're just about out of time, and it's just flown. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing yourself and your passions with us. It's been wonderful, and I'm really glad that we've had a chance to introduce you to our listeners. How can people get a hold of you if they would like to?
Okay, so probably the best way is through the B. Vradenburg Foundation, which means you've got to take a stab at spelling it.
Yeah. And that's Vradenburg. Vradenburg.
Yeah, if you look up Vradenburg Foundation, you'll find a wonderful organization in Washington, D.C. that funds Alzheimer's research. But if you look up B. Vradenburg, that's B-E-E, like the little buzzing thing that visits all the flowers. B. Vradenburg is the name of the lady, and that's the name of the foundation.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Claire. And everyone, thank you for joining us. It's been another wonderful day in the Brighter Day neighborhood. You can join us here each week at the same time and station. Until then, have a brighter day.